You know, if there was ever a time to have hesitation marks on vinyl to have in the background of a video, it probably would be this video and not many others I can think of off the top of my head. But I don't have that album, so I'm settling for Bad Witch because it is a Trent Atticus 9 Inch Nails era project. But regardless, hello world of YouTube, I am the world's worst 9 Inch Nails superfan. Because while I love the band so very dearly, you guys know they're my favorite band of all time, it's been over a year since I last made a video talking about said band. And even today's video isn't technically about 9 Inch Nails, but it's adjacent. Obviously, you've clicked on the video, you know the subject of the video. This is all just dramatic build-up to not necessarily extend the runtime, but it does help do that. I'm talking about a project that Trent formed in the wake of the hiatus that 9 Inch Nails took in the late 2000s, How to Destroy Angels. A band fronted by his wife, Mary Queen Mandig, also had his future permanent bandmate, Atticus Ross, in the roster, and had frequent creative collaborator, Rob Sheridan, in the mix. They were a project that dropped this EP in 2010 before building a little bit of hype for a couple of years that would build to the subject of today's video that even when it came out, I liked, but didn't talk about outside of putting it on my end of the year list. The album in question also turns 10 this year, so why not talk about it now? I'm talking about the sole studio full-length album by How to Destroy Angels, Welcome Oblivion. One of the things I'll say I like about Welcome Oblivion, even to this day, is that it takes the ideas on here and sort of the production style and the songwriting style that maybe had some moments that felt like it was shedding some of that 9 Inch Nail skin to some degree on this EP completely away on Welcome Oblivion. This feels more like this project's truest step forward at showcasing what they're about sonically, while also still creatively feel like Trent and Atticus are sort of incorporating stuff that they had been doing over the last couple of years for soundtrack work in some of the more ambient-driven or sonic tapestry style to the lower key aspects that this album has going on at its core. You know, while there are still some moments of true, real intensity through build-ups that we're seeing on this debut, like on Ice Age especially, that's a big highlight that I still get a lot of heavy rotation out of. I love the sonic tapestry of that song. The more acoustic-driven start that builds to this industrial-style, gargantuan meltdown, I think is incredible. I think that tracks like Reclusive Self-Improvement and Hollow Ground in the back half also have similar, longer, slow burn buildups that I think stick the landing tenfold. In fact, I think Reclusive Self-Improvement almost feels like a melding of those How to Destroy Angels ideas with some of that cyclical sonic tapestry songwriting or song structuring, compositioning, I guess, that went on during those scores. I also like that they don't lose sight of these more minimal, groove-centric tracks. They don't necessarily have a hook, but have these recurring refrains to keep the listener invested in these ideas, like Keep It Together and The Loop Closes, Too Late All Gone. While these more hook-driven tracks or lead-driven tracks, like on In the Sky Begin to Scream and the title track, which fit really nicely together in the track listing, or How Long, keep the listener sort of invested in a more traditional song style. And there's other tracks that try to tap into that, not necessarily to the same consistent caliber, but still have some decent ideas at their core, like On the Wing and We Fade Away. While I think there are definitely people that could also bring up that there are components of this that feel very inspired by like the Ghost sessions, the first era of Ghost sessions that Trent and Atticus did around the time of 9 Inch Nails' dissolvement, especially in those harnessing of different sonic components. I mean, hell, while I like Ice Age and I think that it's a strong point on the album, I could see somebody saying, well, that kind of sounds like a Ghost expansion. That kind of feels like the point of this. You know, like I said, it feels like Trent sort of trying to break out of that pigeonhole that he had been stuck in and pushing forth into different adjacent sonic ideas. You know, this band got their name from a Coil song, and it feels very more in line with, like, not necessarily the dense styles of where industrial goes. Sure, there's still some buildups, but I like that this focuses more on ambience and glitch-driven ideas that felt very where Trent was creatively feeling at the time. You know, while I do think that there are some forgettable tracks on here, or some tracks that feel like maybe filler, like strings and detractors, and like I said, tracks like On the Wing not necessarily coming together quite as homogeneously as other ideas from this project. By the by, this album is still really fucking good. You know, the minimalism I really think is the best component of it. And I would argue also kind of helped influence the direction that sort of Trent and eventually Atticus would take Nine Inch Nails proper. You know, you look at the ambient ideas on here, not necessarily the glitch stuff. The glitch stuff kind of feels like maybe sort of tangential to where parts of maybe Bad Witch went, but like the ambient stuff on here, the real beauty that's seen in parts of this album sonically, reminds me of Ghost 5 when they decided to pull that together in 2020. You know, the ideas on here have this sense of beauty to them that I think Trent and Mariqueen vocally help work and unify. I think their vocal work together is incredible. I wish they did more stuff together in this outfit, because when this album is so strong, it is pretty damn good. Because it's not like they haven't been collaborating or done stuff post Welcome Oblivion. I mean, Mariqueen sang on the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo soundtrack. When they performed on the Twin Peaks revival, I think Mariqueen and Rob, they performed not necessarily as How to Destroy Angels, but all the collaborative entities were in that performance. I like that he and this band of, you know, collaborators helped create a sonic identity all its own, and I would argue kind of helped Trent get out of whatever funk he was feeling by being separate from the entity of Nine Inch Nails. And while there were moments that, again, at the time I didn't love as much, and that non-love has continued to grow as years have gone on, I still feel like this album kind of got a bad rap and kind of got lost to time. You know, again, I get steady rotation at a good chunks of this album, and while I wouldn't necessarily put it as high on like in top 50 of 2013 if I were to do that, it probably would still end up somewhere on there, because I appreciate the payoff that this album sort of acts as to the How to Destroy Angels chapter of Atticus and Trent's musical trajectory. And I feel like collectively at the time that was sort of part of the opinion.
I can't help feeling like this is just kind of something to tide fans over, and I don't really know if there's going to be like a lot of studio albums from this group or not.
Especially when shortly after this was released, Nine Inch Nails did come back. And it's kind of a shame, because this album definitely, I feel like, got encompassed by that. You know, the return of Nine Inch Nails, I feel like, sort of kneecapped the end of How to Destroy Angels. And that's not to say that they're done, because most of this band here are pretty close, given two of them are married and one of them are band members together still to this day. But I will say, I think sort of the meddling reception to some pockets of the internet, and by and large that this album had received, may have lent to more of an accenting of Nine Inch Nails' return. But it's kind of a shame, because there's some cool ideas on here. And while I probably give this like the microdacted treatment, I still think that it's worth spinning all these years later by and large. And it acts as an interesting footnote, at least, at the end of the day, for Trent and Atticus, as being this sort of time in their creative realms where they were doing something different, doing something cool. And I think Mariqueen's a great singer. I think that she and Trent vocally work really well together. His sort of groveling low end helps accent Mariqueen's beauty, and I feel like when they do harmonize together, it creates this cool sound. And again, I kind of wish was just explored more. I think that the ideas here are cool, but I could see people sort of passing this by as a whole as the years go on and as the years have gone on. But I would argue it's a gem. It's still worth your time. If you haven't listened to it and you are a fan of Nine Inch Nails, it's been some time. I could see this being lost in the fray. Give it a listen. If you have spun Welcome Oblivion in recent memory, what have you thought about it? If you haven't, give it a spin and let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this particular reflection on a gem, give it a like. If you want to see more, consider subscribing. I drop 2 to 4 vids a week, depending on what I've got going on at the time. I'm going to go, though. Thank you again so very much for watching. I've been Viral Rack. You guys have good days, lives, and situations, and I'll see you another day.